Today, I'm going to discuss overtourism in Japan. I've been in Japan for over 10 years now, and I've noticed a lot of news recently about overtourism in Japan, so I decided to share my thoughts and experiences and give you my advice. Is Japan the most visited country in the world now? The answer is no. But why is Japan such a popular place to visit these days? And it's kind of simple if you consider excellent customer service. It's a really fun country, loads of historical things to do, great for shopping, nice weather, has distinctive seasons. You can enjoy the summer, the autumn, the cherry blossoms, which is the most popular season. Also, it's safe, there are no scammers, there's no one gonna trick you out of your money. And most importantly, the yen is weak, so now's a perfect chance to visit Japan. Oh, and loads of cute girls. But here's the main question. Is overtourism a real thing in Japan? It's hard to answer that. I would say yes and no. Like, yes, there are loads of tourists, like crazy amount of tourists in the past few years since COVID. So yes, overtourism is real. However, the problem is its infrastructure. Like, if you've ever been to Kyoto, there are a limited number of buses and the streets are narrow. So the problem is that all the tourists are just being narrowed into these small streets and paths. That's the main problem in Japan, is that all of these popular sightseeing spots, they're just too flipping small. So people are herded in like farm animals, and that's the problem. If you combine that with limited English speakers in shops, you get language confusion, translation problems, too small, too cramped, and it's going to be a pretty miserable, shitty experience. Because if you think about it, Japan has quite a high population, over 120 million, which is much higher than France, Spain, Turkey. However, they have fewer tourists, so technically the problem isn't like the population, it's just how they're gathered in these small areas. Some other examples of famous places: Asakusa, Takeshita Dori, Ueno. All these places are just way too narrow. Another problem, especially in Kyoto, is the transportation problem, because Kyoto doesn't have a subway, it only has bus. So you have these limited buses and it just can't keep with the flow of the traffic. Tokyo is different, however, because you have the metro, you have the JR, you have the bus, you have all sorts of transportation. So it's nowhere near as bad as going to Kyoto or these smaller towns. Also, a key reason for overtourism is simply lack of research. Japan, in fact, is actually a pretty empty country. Most of it is empty, it's just the big cities. If you go outside of these big cities, there are so many nice places which foreign people have no idea about. It's just the limited knowledge they have. They all go to the same places, and that's what happens, overcrowding. It's like waiting for the morning train. Everyone's waiting in the same flipping car, completely packed, but they don't move down the platform where it's less crowded. There's also been some news articles about tourists misbehaving and just doing dumb shit. And unfortunately, that's just what's going to happen when you have so many people. The majority are perfectly fine, normal people, well behaved, minding their own business, and are there to enjoy Japan. You are going to get the occasional scumbags, and that's a small minority. It likes rules, how to conduct yourself in society, in public, but it's not like Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, where they're also strict, but you'll get in trouble if you misbehave or get your knob chopped off. They're gonna behave themselves. A key example is if you take the train in Japan, no one speaks. That's just one of their rules. No one uses a phone, no one speaks loud. But in Western countries, that's normal. So when these tourists come to Japan, they assume it's like Western countries and they just chat freely. It's the culture difference and not really doing your research on how to act in Japan. The majority of Japanese people aren't that used to foreigners, so seeing so many foreigners at one time might give them a heart attack or a stroke. If you take the train in Japan, as a foreigner, you will know that you have the gaijin space where you sit down and the seat next to you is the last one Japanese people want to choose because they're intimidated or afraid that you might speak English and they don't have the language capability to speak back to you. So imagine that times 100. They're going to be a bit intimidated and afraid. But it's just something that Japan needs to get over eventually, because you don't really have this problem in Europe or America or Australia or even like South Asia, because they're used to having so many foreigners. So my advice would simply be, do more research before coming to Japan. Don't waste your time going to these tourist hotspots like Kyoto, Asakusa, because they're overrated. It's not all that. Do your research and you would see that loads of places in Japan are a lot more fun. Like now is cherry blossom season. The places people are going to visit are Meguro River, Shinjuku Park, and I'm going to enjoy cherry blossoms tomorrow all by myself, no tourists, just 10 minutes from my house. That's an example of where you just do your research and you find places which are really nice, just as popular, just as good as the ones in the books, but no tourists. In fact, if you check out my Only in Japan or 6 Minutes in Japan playlists, I've gone to various places in Japan, and if you look, there aren't that many tourists and the places are rather nice. Avoid the stress, save money and have more fun. Also, I think Japanese people over time, they do need to be more accepting of foreigners. It's going to happen eventually, it's inevitable. So I know there are going to be cultural differences, but the rest of the Western world and other countries have accepted it. So it's just a matter of time, really. You should be more adventurous in Japan. Just don't follow the popular places which the TV and books recommend. It's such a good feeling when you go to random places in Japan and you're the only foreigner. It feels like you've discovered a secret place and you don't want to tell anyone about it, and you can really have fun there. I have many places like that in Japan. To those misbehaving foreigners, just fuck off. Don't do that, because it's given us all a bad name. The reality is that Japan is an awesome place to visit and there's loads of fun to be had here. I want you to have fun in Japan. The only thing you have to do is just be mindful of your research and you'll have loads of fun here. Just don't fall into the same traps that the casual tourist does. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for checking out my video. Let me know what you think. I hope you learned something useful from my video, or am I chatting out of me arse? Comment down below. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Cheers.